Hey, good afternoon or morning, Faithful Politics listeners or viewers, if you're watching our YouTube channel. I am your political host, Will Wright, and I am joined today with Sarah Bailey. Is it Sarah Pulliam Bailey or is it
It's
Sarah Bailey?
fine. Sarah Bailey's fine. Sarah Pulliam Bailey's fine. Whatever.
And
Thanks.
she is a religious reporter for the Washington Post, and I gotta admit, Sarah, I did not know that was a thing for a while. I mean, like I would read articles about religion, but I didn't know that's like a whole field of like journalism. Can you tell us just a little bit more about like what that entails?
Yeah, so I didn't know it was a thing until I was in college. And then when I was in college, George W. Bush won re-election, and there were all these articles about like evangelicals and how could they have voted for George W. Bush, and just this fascination with religion, and then with different popes like Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. Like there's this huge interest in religion, and so I realized, oh, there are reporters who specialize like not just in politics or business or education, but there's this field, small field, like there are like 10 of us, but that focus on, we cover religion. So we don't write our opinion. We don't, write about our feelings. Like we just, Pope Francis said this, or, Joe Biden went to church, or whatever the story is. Like that's, we try to track like how is religion influencing kind of where America is headed.
Got it. How now, without necessarily having to get into like your own personal beliefs, but like how do your beliefs kind of help you in your current job? I mean, like if you were an atheist, your beliefs would probably color your writing in a certain manner.
Mhm.
If you're a Muslim, if you're Christian, so on and so forth. So how do you utilize your beliefs to kind of help you become really good at your job?
Yeah, so I kind of take the approach of, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So if somebody were to write about my own faith or my own tradition, I would hope they are fair. I hope they are thorough, not necessarily writing like a puff piece or a happy piece, but I hope they show it in its sort of truest form. Not necessarily, again, in its best form, but its truest. And so when I am looking at other faith traditions, I try to do kind of the deep dive that I would hope someone else would do with my own tradition, and researching and doing interviews and really asking a lot of questions to get at like the root of things, instead of just like a surface level impression or kind of cliche understandings of faith traditions.
Got it. Now to switch gears a little bit to maybe a topic that's not as fun to talk about. Let's talk about abortion for a second. So recently, Texas passed SB 8, which is probably one of the more strictest or most strictest abortion laws in the country. And I'm curious on what you're seeing kind of from the faith community about the law. I mean, generally conservatives, religious types tend to favor any sort of anti-abortion measure, but this one's a little bit more unique. So can you talk about what you're seeing when you're talking to people, how they feel about it?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about this one is it really took a lot of people by surprise. Like I think a lot of people just assumed it would get struck down by the Supreme Court. This doesn't match up to Roe v. Wade. Like I think a lot of people just assumed it wasn't going to pass, and then all of a sudden people were like, "Oh wow, it did work." And so it's interesting because I'm not a legal scholar. I don't specialize in Texas law, but I have been reading a little bit more and talking to different people about why this is so unusual, why it works. And my understanding is that it's the enforcement mechanism. So the idea that that anyone can sue anyone else who might be participating in the act of abortion, and so that is unusual, as opposed to like, say, the police or the sheriff or whatever coming to come arrest you for some crime. And so it's the enforcement mechanism that is so unusual. And some people say that this could open it up to other questioning other states, like say gun rights or other certain people claiming religious freedoms could be a way to circumvent, some of these constitutional issues. I guess it goes back, this is based on my reading and kind of talking to people, it goes back to the idea that states, didn't want federal oversight. They didn't want the federal government, telling them what to do. And so this is sort of a loophole around that. Now, how people are reacting to this approach is it's been kind of all over the map. Like, I've talked to several pregnancy centers. So these centers that advise women, they typically advise women against having an abortion. They talk about their options. They show them an ultrasound usually. A lot of them say that they've had an uptick in calls. They've had an uptick in interest, because a lot of the abortion clinics have had to turn women away if they're past, the 6-week mark. And and so some of these anti-abortion activists are really pleased. They're really, excited, and they think, this could save, thousands, I don't know, babies. So on the other hand, I think one part of what's interesting is from a legal strategy. I have seen several conservative, again, anti-abortion activists who are saying this is the wrong way to go. Like, what we actually need to do is a more incremental approach to chipping away at Roe v. Wade, so that we can deal with this at a federal level, so that we can deal with it, like, once Roe v. Wade is overturned, then we deal with it at the state level. And so it really depends on on the legal strategy, I think, that people are going for. But yeah, this came as a shock. This was a huge surprise. A lot of pro-abortion groups are, scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. Some pastors who are pro-abortion rights are trying to figure out, what does this mean? Are they, could they be complicit in advising a woman to have an abortion? Could they get sued? What does that mean for their religious freedom? So it's definitely having ripple effects, because Texas is such a big state. It's such an important state. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. As Texas is doing all this, Mississippi is by them saying, like, hold my beer, because, like, they've got this case that's going to the Supreme Court that's gonna challenge Roe v. Wade.
Right. So that'll be much more interesting. And I just saw an AP alert that I guess they're hearing arguments on that on December 1st. So I think that a lot of people are saying that's sort of the next thing to watch. So with the Texas law, the Justice Department has filed a suit to try to block this new law. So it's unclear, whether that'll succeed. But I do think this Mississippi case will be the next thing that we're looking at in terms of, like, federally, like what could happen for the country.
Yeah. In the last few minutes that we have, I want to just get your thoughts on vaccines in the Christian community. I know that you wrote an article about a pastor that was, like, selling, I don't know, like, waivers. I'm not really sure.
Right.
And that's, like, on one side.
Let me tweak that. So what happened was, there's this pastor in Oklahoma that said, you can get a religious exemption from me, but you have to join my church. And to join my church, based on our church bylaws, you have to donate to our church. So when I talked to him, he's like, it could be $1, it could be it could be anything. But he is claiming that in order to get a religious exemption from him, you need to donate money to his church. Now, every legal scholar that I've talked to says you do not need you should not, constitutionally, your rights, you should not need a pastor's signature or a clergy person's signature to say that you have a religious, right to not get the vaccine. Now, there's a whole separate conversation over whether vaccine mandates, these, like, religious exemptions, will work, because what's complicated about this is that the courts have generally favored sort of public health over religious exemptions. So we'll see if it works. But historically, the courts have said, if you have a belief, a religious belief, like, you can have it, you can be Catholic and say, like, I need to have wear my rosary outside of my clothes, even though the Catholic Church doesn't necessarily say that. They don't, you don't need the Catholic Church's backing to say that. So I think what's interesting is that this pastor is pitching this, and apparently there are a lot of people who are seeking, religious exemptions right now. But people also should know that they shouldn't need them in the courts. So
yeah, it's funny. Like I'm ordained by the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and I'm wondering. I mean, I'm vaccinated, but like I wonder if I can go to them and ask them if I can get an exemption just to see what they.
I think the part of the point is I don't think you need to go to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. You can just say, I am a member. I identify this way, and so I claim this. Whether you get it or not, and whether you could like legally make that claim is another question, but you shouldn't need the permission of your tradition.
It's true. And on the flip side of that is you've got like Pastor Jeff Jeffress, who's basically come out and saying there's no religious reason at all that you shouldn't take the vaccine. And he even went as far, in an article I read from The Hill, where he's like, if you're going to claim this religious exemption, you also have to stop like taking Tylenol and Pepto-Bismol and like and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I thought that was such an interesting contrast. I mean, here's this guy that is, supported Trump from the onset, and he's saying no, like you should get it.
Yeah, there are no major like religious traditions or even individuals who have been anti-vax, which is really interesting to me. Like there are definitely certain pastors who are, of certain kinds of congregations who might discourage the vaccine. But when it comes to sort of the institutional Catholic Church or the institutional like Southern Baptist Convention, their, ethics and religious liberty, they endorse the vaccine. They say, go get it. And so, it is strange because when it comes to these religious exemptions, like it's really up to people's individual beliefs versus like having this institutional backing of like, oh, we are hesitant. I've heard a lot in recent weeks, a lot of people are claiming that these vaccines have aborted tissue in them, and they do not. That is false. Like that is debunked. That is false information. But that comes up a lot, partly because they do use in the testing of the vaccines, they do use this sort of cell line that came from an abortion from like decades ago. But so a lot of ethicists, medical ethicists, faith and medical ethicists have said that that's so tangential to the actual vaccine that it shouldn't be considered a problem.
Got it. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for just sort of, giving us a peek behind the scenes of what it is a religious reporter does. We definitely appreciate your take and all the hard work that you're doing out there. And and
great
we'll love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, thanks. Right. Thanks for having me.
Right. Yeah, thanks so much.